everyone. Welcome to the Kirkpatrick podcast. It is Vanessa here with a very special guest, my favorite AI human. Well, not that she is AI, but she's my favorite go-to person about AI, Myra Roldan. Myra, welcome to the Kirkpatrick podcast. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for first of all inviting me. I am doing great. I woke up thinking it was Friday, but it's really like not. So
Oh, that's the
yeah.
worst. Oh, well, we're almost there, almost there. Well, before I get to your bio and a little bit more about you, I just want to give our listeners a quick update on what's going on in the world of Kirkpatrick. So our 2025 events calendar has been published. So if you are looking to get certified in 2025, please make sure you check that out. Seats book up pretty quickly, so you want to secure your spot early. There is still time to get bronze certified in 2024. We have one more event in December, so make sure you grab that spot. And our Kirkpatrick Summit for 2025 is open for enrollment. Do not miss out. It is September 9th to 11th. We've got a really great theme, amazing guests that are going to be coming, and we're really excited to see you all. Also, for those of you who are not sure, about the Kirkpatrick certification, or you're just curious about more about what it looks like and all of the things that come with being certified and what the new bronze and silver program look like, and maybe even I'll be sharing some future things that are coming in the not too far distant future. Make sure you join the open house happening November 12th. And just so you know, the open house will be recorded, so if you can't make it live, you could always catch the replay. All right, so enough about what's going on in Kirkpatrick. Let's get to Myra. So Myra Roldan is a visionary thought leader and powerhouse, truly a powerhouse, keynote speaker with decades of experience in artificial intelligence and disruptive technologies such as blockchain and mixed reality. As a LinkedIn top artificial intelligence voice, she excels at demystifying complex technologies, making them accessible and engaging for diverse audiences. She can make it make sense to me, y'all. She can make it make sense to anybody. Myra is deeply committed to advancing and improving the well-being of communities traditionally denied a seat at the table. Woman after my own heart. Myra's latest book, Unlocking the Power of AI, is a groundbreaking guide that helps learning teams understand the fundamentals of AI, its applications, and critical considerations such as security and ethics. As a recognized LinkedIn top artificial intelligence voice, she brings unparalleled experience and a forward-thinking perspective to her presentations. In her role as founder and CEO of Undeso AI, a boutique AI agency, she helps businesses integrate AI to innovate, improve efficiencies, and gain a competitive edge. She's also the co-founder of the AI Academy, which provides businesses with AI training for their employees, facilitated by an AI expert. Myra, thank you again so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
So, talk to me about your journey. Did you didn't get into the business with AI in mind? How did you maybe fall into AI? And where did you start and where did your journey then take you that led you to here?
Yeah, definitely. So, I've shared this story with people before. I was a nurse before I was in tech. So I was a nurse for like 10 years, and I put myself through school to get my computer science degree. And I was hired like right off the bat, which is great. At the time, there weren't a lot of women in tech. We didn't hold like active roles, and it was back in the early '90s and or I would say early 2000s, late '90s. There was a lot of it's a very very male driven industry,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time I was switching and routing and building networks and managing networks and with that, we used forms of artificial intelligence to actually monitor our networks. It started evolving. And so I started working with AI really early on, building some rule based models to actually monitor. networks. At one point, I managed the payments and adjudication systems for the city of New York across 5 boroughs. So think about like like how big that network is.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you had tools that were had AI in them from a technology perspective. It wasn't accessible to the average user,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I just got deeper and deeper into it because building a model was not super easy. And so initially, you worked with like someone that built algorithms or who could create new protocols. And the technology has evolved over the years where it became easier and easier for people who didn't have PhD degrees, right, to build these AI models without having to build the algorithm. So the building an algorithm it's complex, right? There's a lot of math, a lot of science that goes behind that. But when you have a library of algorithms, it became easier to build the models. And so that evolved because then we ended up getting these things,
Yep. Our
phones,
phones. Yep.
and we ended up getting um, a voice assistants, right? Things like
Right.
Alexa and Google Home. And so I started playing around with like, can I hack one of these devices
Mm-hmm.
to do what I want it to do? And then that turned into, can I hack it to extract data from it? Can I hack it to like do all these things? And then I eventually wrote a book that's used by some colleges still to this day on designing user interfaces. And that was I wrote that book in 2019. So it's taking all of the experimentation I've done over the years with AI and building tools with AI, like traditional AI, to where we are now. So it's been a journey. It hasn't been something where I just fell into it and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, look at me, I'm an instant like expert, right?
Not
It's
saying there's
been
some out there, but
it's been years of learning and tinkering, right? I am very hands-on, and so we're at a point right now where AI is accessible to everyone, and you don't need a PhD to use
yeah.
it.
And I think that's where the misconception can certainly come in. You're talking about, late 90s, early 2000s, amazing era. If I could go back to the 90s, man, I would totally go back. Um, but it really was always there in different ways, shapes, or form. You're totally right. It's the accessibility to it now that has changed. The idea, you and I were chatting about something. Oh, well, always, how am I going to create my own? But you
Mm-hmm.
said something that finally clicked in my head, and you said, anyone can create like a little widget or a little, AI bot now. What you're doing is attaching it to the things that already exist. Where in my mind, because I remember, the idea of, oh, you want to create a new technology, you want to create something new, it was so much coding, so much money, so much. There's just so much on the back end that made it inaccessible for those that didn't have access to so much time, capital, and resources. So it's pretty interesting to see how things have shifted, but also still that misconception that it's really not new. Just generative AI is new for us.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I tell people that I've been like in this space for 12 years, they're like, what do you mean 12 years? Like it just launched 2 years ago. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when you realize that what people think is AI is they're really talking about generative AI.
Yeah.
Um, and generative AI isn't new either. That's, the form that we are using it in today is new, but generative AI as a type of AI is not new,
Yeah.
right? It's just the way that it's being used now is new.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me how you see AI transforming the landscape for, learning and performance, professionals and evaluation. What do you see as near term, and then what do you see as longer term?
Yeah, so think of the way I think of generative AI is right now it's a catalyst, right? So it's a catalyst that's forcing everyone to rethink the way they work. Um, and if you think it's kind of a similar catalyst that we had when the internet was introduced
Mhm.
decades ago, right? So before, think about like when you used the internet and you had to like dial up, suffer with like the AOL
Yeah.
sounds, right?
Yep. It's
And
all ringing in my head right
you
now.
got mail.
Yep.
Right? That was a catalyst because back then email was not a thing. Internet was not a thing in business, right? And so we as a society found use cases for it and adapted. But at the very beginning, like people weren't sure of the use case in business. There were skeptics that even believed that the internet would be a thing, right? That
Mhm.
it was just like a trend. It would never take off. It's never going to change anything. And look at
Right.
where we are today, right? Where it is just a natural part of our life. When you want information, what's the first thing you say? Oh, I'm going to Google that, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's not even like, can I go on the internet and find this? We're going through that same transition right now, and that so AI is that catalyst right now that's driving that generative AI. And let me just clarify, generative AI is that catalyst that's driving that because everyone now has access to AI
Hmm.
in a format where it does not require you to have strong mathematical, statistical probability background to be able to build an algorithm and make it do what you want to do. Now you can just use simple words, give it to an AI tool, and it creates something. But this is still a form of weak AI, right? Because the AI we have right now, like when you think about ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Mistral, all these other tools, they are text predictors. So
Hmm.
all they're doing is they're predicting the next word in a sequence. Your phone does that when you text right now too. With the autofill,
Yeah.
where it changes like, when you're trying to say like the F word and it changes it to ducking.
Oh, the
Um,
worst. It's never, to be clear, Apple, it is never ducking. It is always the other word.
yeah,
At least for my phone.
mine too. But that's the thing, right? So it's just a text predictor. It cannot. So generative AI can transform
Mhm.
um, historical data into new content. Think about that. It can transform historical data
Mhm.
into new content, right? Um, it's not generating new content out of like the oblivion,
Right.
out of nothing, right? It needs a ton of data to be able to generate new data. And so I always try to I haven't found a good analogy for that yet, other than like a transformer robot, where it's like Bumblebee. One
Right.
minute is like a yellow car that you drive, which is traditional AI, and
Mhm.
then it transforms into a robot, right?
Mhm.
That's the only visual that I can give people. So it created something new from something historical, right? That we all know.
Right.
And
Well,
yeah.
and I think to your point, so one of the things that I get mad at ChatGPT on is whenever I ask it about the Kirkpatrick model, it pulls the old version and not the updated model that we're using, right? Unless I can like specifically ask for it. And so I see it that way too, right? Like it's only gonna pull whatever it has the most data on, right? And
Mhm.
comparatively, right, the most of the data, even though it's outdated, is on the old version of the model. And so that has a lot of implications for sure. I also can think of it like, my dream, and is to create, something in which I could say, I want to create a training on this, and it helps to really like create it. What it is, it's pulling from whatever is already out there. And so you have to be super careful with that, right? And really validate, because what it could be pulling in is totally inaccurate, or you could maybe copywritten. You didn't even know that you're pulling that sort of data
Yep.
in. So there's a lot of implications when we're looking at use cases for AI and learning.
Yeah, and that the one thing that I stress with everyone, so when I work with clients, the one thing I stress is like you're responsible for the output of that AI,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you make it public. So with Kirkpatrick, right? Think about this, like the model is trained up until, I think right now the newest one is up to 2022.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the knowledge stops, right?
Right.
Um, 4.0 does have some access to the internet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some access, but it's going to pull. So we don't know. So there's a black box problem with generative AI. So we don't understand. We can't tell you how the generative AI is making decisions on like what it when it decides to do, like how did it make that decision to give you
Right.
the output that it gave you. And it's a problem, right? Because, and this is just a theory, this is just my theory is that because it has been trained extensively, let's say on the Kirkpatrick model, on the old model, right, there's a ton of data on
Yeah.
the old Kirkpatrick model. So it's gonna that's where it's gonna pull from. It's gonna pull from what it knows best. So think about when you're like, have you ever watched debates, like student debates, like
Yeah.
debate teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
They practice really hard to understand the information up until a point of time. Now, if you ask them a question that is beyond the point that they studied, meaning let's say they had to study world history through 2000, 2000 and up until 2010. And then in the debate, you ask them a question about a current event that happened maybe yesterday or the day before. Will they
Yeah.
be able to answer it?
Right. They freak.
They'd freak. They'd probably make something up to like fill
Yeah.
the space,
Right. Mm-hmm.
right? Hallucination.
Yeah. Yeah. I just watched the Girls episode. I know exactly about
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great analogy. Um, do you think so this is could get a little spicy. Do you think our profession is ready for AI?
I can
Our
tell you that I don't
industry?
think any profession is ready for
Mm-hmm.
AI, right? I think we're right now everyone's trying to fit a round peg into a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out the use cases. No industry has completely figured out the use cases, and everyone's kind of on the same playing field, right? I think that the reason we see some industries that appear to be way ahead, like healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
is because they are more adept to change,
That's true. That's fair.
right? So in healthcare, there's always a new disease, there's always some kind of illness that you need to be able to diagnose and treat and figure out like what's the long-term treatment, like there's what's the short-term treatment but what's the long-term treatment for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're always changing. It's a industry that's adept to change. When you think about industries like banking, L&D, right,
Yeah.
those are industries that are set in their ways. They're not used to rapid change and are slower to adopt new technologies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if it ain't fixed, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of mentality.
Yeah.
But it also puts you at risk in L&D, right? Um, because you have companies that are demanding the integration of new technologies into systems or demanding training on the new technologies on the systems, and they know that their L&D departments cannot deliver that,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Right.
because the L&D departments tend to believe that they have to be the be all and end all of the knowledge, and if they don't
Mm.
have the knowledge they can't do it. And it's like thinking outside of the box. How do you bring an expert in, right?
Right.
An external expert in? How do you ensure that you keep current, right? It doesn't mean that you need to tax your team into having all of the knowledge. You need to teach your team to be fishers,
Right.
right? And they don't have to be the ones to know it all and be be all. They do need to learn how to use the tools.
Right.
Um, but like they need to start allowing their teams to be able to fish outside for current data that then they can bring inside and integrate into like their stories within an organization. So I think we're going to see a change. And like when you think about um, just the workforce in general,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're starting to see job titles that are required, or job descriptions that are starting to require some knowledge of a large language model,
Right.
right? Which is what drives like a chat GPT. And so we're going to see a shift. We're going to see a shift in industries. I also think we're going to start seeing a lot of companies start to go under. And it won't be because ChatGPT took the jobs, right? That because that's what everyone thinks is ChatGPT is going to take the jobs. It's not going to be because AI took the jobs. It's because they aren't the companies aren't nimble enough and aren't able to keep up.
Yeah, really, in today's world, the name of the game is agility, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only, what do they
Yeah.
say? Like the only constant in life is change.
Yep.
And really that's what we have to be ready for. One of the things
Yeah.
that you talked about in our webinar together, so for those of you that maybe weren't there, we did a webinar, Kirkpatrick and AI, about a month ago, and Myra was our amazing guest expert. See, we can bring experts in too.
Yeah.
Um, we talked about how AI could assist with some of the different levels and how do you do the evaluation. Can you expand a little bit more on how AI can be used to streamline evaluations without replacing the human touch? Again, to your point, ChatGPT not taking your job, right? You are still
Mhm.
need to be there.
Yeah. So I always like to we developed this framework. So Nicole Papiano and I have been working together. From Nicole's from your instructional designer, and we developed a framework to help um, people who go through our AI Academy
Mm-hmm.
to figure out like how do you integrate AI into your workflow, right? So that's the first thing is figuring out like what can you give to AI, what can you share with AI, and what do you need to keep from AI, right? So
Mm-hmm.
starting there. And so when you think about the Kirkpatrick evaluation, right?
Right.
There are some things that are repetitive, right? Like what are those repetitive tasks that have to be done
Mm-hmm.
that don't require a human, right? Like maybe it's synthesizing data, like
Right.
gathering all that data and making a little sense out of it,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then feeding it the new model,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you giving it a first pass, and then asking the AI to review it and find any gaps, right? Any holes into like the insights, because it's not going to know right off the bat. You need to give it examples
Yeah.
of what you want it to do. You need to, it's called RAG, right? It's a form of training the model to do what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so starting off like that and saying like, this is the new model. This is how I ran the evaluation. I want you to and do a gap analysis on this against the new model and what I've come up with, and give me a list of areas that I've missed or areas that I can improve.
Mm.
Right? Um, to then when you get that readout, you now have bullet points as to like how to effectively use the new model to evaluate situations. And I would do it with multiple situations, right? Multiple scenarios.
Yeah.
My one caveat is make sure that you have a paid Teams account and not just a paid personal account, because you got to read the terms of service. You can use Copilot for it also.
Mm-hmm.
Copilot, it doesn't do a good job. I don't know, like of when you feed it data to like spit it back out. You can use Anthropic Claude. You can use Gemini, but again, you're going to get different results from
From the
different
different.
models.
So you prefer ChatGPT?
Yeah.
Is that your preference?
Which one?
Oh,
ChatGPT or?
ChatGPT.
It depends. So I use different models for different tasks. I don't use one model for everything.
Oh, and so I think that's a great point,
Yeah.
right? So you're finding that the tools or the models are different or are better at different things.
Hmm.
Um, and we're going to have to be in a world where we use multiple models depending on what it is that we need. How is it just a bunch of trial and error to figure out what works best for what?
Yeah, right now it is,
Yeah.
right? Especially for your use cases. Like I'll tell you, I use, for example, I use Julius for data analysis, Julius AI for data
Right.
analysis. I use ChatGPT for like content creation when I need to um, have something improved, right? I don't like to ask it to like do everything from scratch. I like it to improve upon my writing, and I've
Mm-hmm.
trained it on my style of voice. It could do little things like write a LinkedIn article on X, but because I'm always writing on something that's new that just came out, I
Right.
can't get it to write on it because it doesn't know about it, right?
Right. So 2 years behind.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I also find that like Claude is better for like I'm writing a book right now, right? So Claude is better for like that literature writing, literature reviews. Actually, I find that Perplexity.ai is great at literature reviews. And when I'm doing peer review, writing peer review documents that I want peer reviewed for like scientific publishing or whatever I'm doing with it, um, Perplexity is like my go-to. I use that every day.
Wow.
That's the one, that's the one tool I use every day.
That's incredible because I think, and that also makes it, I think, overwhelming for some of our listeners too, because it does feel like a lot when we're just trying to figure out step one. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think too, to your point, hearing about the differences and that some things may be good for certain things. If you're just going to chat GPT and asking it to do one of these things that it's not necessarily great at and you don't get great results, you know, natural reaction is you kind of write off the fact that AI can't do this or, you know, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. And then you never go back or think to try something else. So I would say definitely an actionable takeaway for our listeners is certainly to, you know, if it doesn't work once, number one, try it again. But two, think about the tool and maybe there's a different tool out there that's a better use for it.
Yeah. And also it's like, with the Kirkpatrick model having changed,
Mm-hmm.
is taking the time to actually train, you know,
Right.
and ChatGPT on it. And I think I think that Kirkpatrick corporate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this. It's like, how do we train something that then can be used by others, right? And
Right.
I think that would be an interesting study and
Mm-hmm.
practice, right? So
I don't know what you're talking about. So I think that we're talking about like the different like one of the things I want to chat a little bit about is, you know, how can organizations use metrics to track their effectiveness of the tools, right? So it's not just a matter of like, how do I use the evaluation, right? But like, is this being effective and are we better for it? What are some things that organizations should be looking at and trying, I guess?
yeah, so you and I had have had extensive conversations around this, right? Like, how do we use can you use the Kirkpatrick model, right, to measure the effectiveness of performance of a tool? So it's non-human,
Right. Yep.
right? Or the effectiveness of the application of AI within an organization. Like, what's that impact? Like, how do you figure out that business impact?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Kirkpatrick has a business impact analysis,
Right.
right? Based on performance.
Right.
What if you flip that and it's not just performance, human performance, but AI performance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you can flip the script, right? Because I believe that the Kirkpatrick model has multiple applications. It's a matter of how you interpret that data, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you use it to align it to the organization? So let's take level one, which is always the easiest, right?
Mm-hmm. Everyone's
So the
favorite.
effectiveness of an AI tool. Imagine rolling out an AI tool in your organization and then having a little survey that pops up and says, how happy were you with this tool? Right? Little
Right.
smiley faces. Boop.
Yeah.
There right now, you gathered level 1
Right.
data on a tool,
Mm-hmm. Well,
right?
and not to cut you off, but it's also bringing up in my mind, I did a lot of work in software training. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in doing the or analysis and when getting a request on software training, I'm like, it's not a training issue, it's a software issue. But no
Mm-hmm.
one goes back to think about the the software tool and like could it be there? So imagine having that level 1 data on the tool itself, so you're able to identify, the gaps and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, think about how, like, if you were to map that tool data to the user
Mm-hmm.
performance data,
Yeah,
that tells a whole different story,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And then if you think about level 2, what could a level 2 look like,
Mm,
right? We know how it looks like from a human perspective,
right.
but level 2 could be the evaluation of the tool also. Did you feed it data,
Mm-hmm.
right? And was it able to generate data based on that, the new data that you fed it?
Right.
And was it effective, right? How effective was it? Was it able to retain it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Was it able to reference it later on a little bit? Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a few hours later, or did you have to like put the data back in there?
Yeah.
Level 3, what would you think a good level 3 would be?
Oh, so we're thinking about behavior. We're thinking about
Mm-hmm.
essentially performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I even think maybe to what you were just saying, right? I think it's, more of the forgetting. That's the performance, right? I think if you ask it again a few hours later and it's giving you a different answer, it didn't learn, right?
Or a few days later, right?
Right, or a few days, or right, or however long. And I think
Yeah.
if that's another area where we need to be testing, that performance of the tool, is it behaving in the way in which we expected it? What's the downtime like? Right?
Yep.
All of those glitches, I think putting on that different performance lens gives the
Yeah.
model a whole new
Hold on, let's do
perspective.
level 4 now. Because
Ooh,
level 4 is interesting, right?
yeah. I mean, for us, we talk a lot about like what are those first mapping out those leading indicators towards that top level result. And I think
Yep.
first is really understanding. We started with level 1 because that's where
The
many of
easiest.
us
Yeah.
start. But in actuality, we should have started at level 4, and I would have asked you, well, what's the point of the tool? Because
Mm-hmm.
then I could develop those leading indicators, tell us if we're on the way to meeting that need, right? So if the tool is to help, increase efficiency, or give my team, more time back, then I'm going to be tracking. I would love to track their time, or its time, things like that, and how it's supporting the team in that way, and identifying those short-term goals that help me see what the output is going to be of the long term.
Yeah. And imagine having a dashboard with that, right?
Oh,
For the tool. Not about the people, but for the tool.
mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, I think right there, right, you can apply the Kirkpatrick model to anything.
We just put it for
Yeah.
technology. So you heard it here first, folks. The Kirkpatrick model is so flexible, it can be applied to anything. Not saying there
Yes.
isn't conversation about that already. Um, but it is true. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I think, people want to overcomplicate their models and add all of these things, and then if we want to just go back and just say it, implementing this tool, what kind of monetary value did the organization see? And you can do a calculation to figure out the return on investment, right? That's a level 4 result right there.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think there's going to be, it has so many, there's so many applications of it. And then really thinking about, because this is a great case, you also don't want to be spending all of your time with all these tools and with all these things if it's not actually helping you, right? understanding that in the beginning, like anything you learn, you're going to have a slowdown, right? You're not going to be that fast in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You need to your point, understand what it's better for. You also have to change, right? Half the time I know I'm getting crappy stuff back because my prompt was crap, really understanding the whole process. But once you get really good at it, it becomes a time saver. But there is, people saying now that they're seeing that, they're not seeing efficiencies from AI. But I think to your point, that's because we're still in the infancy and we're still trying to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah. But imagine applying to level 4 and being able to have those key indicators, right?
Yeah.
So then you can use the Kirkpatrick model to evaluate a tool.
Yeah.
Like,
it's the future powered by Kirkpatrick.
Yeah.
But we've been talking a lot about the tool and the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something interesting earlier that I want to ensure that we don't skip out on is, job descriptions are changing and that ChatGPT isn't going to take the job or the company, right? So how can we ensure that the human is staying connected and the human is, we're still, not to like steal your thunder, but the human's still in the loop.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I wouldn't say you're stealing my thunder. You're stealing AI's thunder. No, because I truly believe in that. We still need human in the loop with AI, right? Because AI is not able to make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The AI we're using is not able to make decisions that are because it doesn't have a model of the world, and so it doesn't understand the implications of its decisions. It doesn't have understanding, right? And so if you're using AI to make decisions, you still need to review those decisions and look at the big picture and see like what else does it impact? Because usually when we're using like a tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or Julius on the data side to make a decision, it has a very narrow view of what we're trying to do because it just has the view of the data that we've given it. It does not have like the big picture view that you need to make decisions to understand like if I make this decision, is it going to impact another part of my business over here negatively? Is it going to create some issues in this other side of the business, right? Or is it going to completely ignore a compliance that we require back here, right? So the AI is getting a narrow window into the decision you have to make, and it's helping you make a decision based on limited data. Right. And so that's why the human is required in there. So even when you're creating a lesson, right? Let's say you're creating a course and you give it all the information and it creates this, you're like, wow, look at this. This is amazing. This would have taken me weeks, right? And you are so enamored with the content, that you're just like, this looks great. I'm just going to publish this, right? And then you start finding out that there's errors in what you published. It's using old data. It's setting scenarios that aren't relevant any longer. It's there's a part of the business that wasn't included in whatever the flow is, and now they're being piled on with extra work because now they have to go down and track people and do all this other stuff just to make sure that whatever piece they're supposed to get, they're getting it. And so it didn't streamline workflows. It just created extra work for everyone else back here.
Right.
Right.
Imagine.
Yeah.
That would be a disaster.
It'd be a nightmare.
Really, truly. So I think, yeah, that's a great point. And it, and also trying to have it create like training plans and things like that, right? Or like curriculum paths and plans. If you don't feed it the right data, it's not going to give you the right recommendations. It's going to give you recommendations based on whatever that it found. But maybe that the person, or your learner isn't sitting at a desk,
Mhm.
8 hours out of the day, or has the ability to, take something on a desktop, or has the ability to take an hour to take a training, right? If you don't give it that sort of data, it's not going to provide you with what it is that you need. You still have to be part of that, and verify.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
tell me, well, first of all, I actually want to quickly touch on something that you and I were chatting about a few weeks ago when you were using, was it the Google Notebook to create your
Oh yeah,
podcast?
Notebook LM.
Notebook at LM,
Yes.
that's what it was. To create your podcast. How is that going?
Yeah, so I just generated another podcast yesterday because they launched a new feature where you can customize
Mm-hmm.
the it's called the deep dive. So the deep dive, so Notebook LM is a Google product. It's free right now. And it you upload your documents and you can ask questions of the documents. They added a feature called Deep Dive a few months ago, and Deep Dive creates a podcast style
Mm-hmm.
discussion about the documents in your repository. You can create multiple repositories. So within the specific repository that you have documents in.
Yeah.
And then I think it was yesterday they released the ability to customize the deep dive because before you didn't have the ability, it just generated a deep dive.
Right. You couldn't
And it
edit.
was good. Like I
Yeah,
posted two podcasts
it was
based on that, right?
freaky. Yeah, it was freaky at how good it was.
Yeah. And so now I have another podcast that I'm posting, and it has multiple documents. I'm posting one on tokenization and the token economy. And what's interesting is that now I can customize what the deep dive is on. Like, where do I want them to focus on? So I last week I had generated the podcast for it, and I was like, this is way too like it's gonna be so over people's heads because I wrote one of the documents and it's I'm like I didn't write it in a way that was meant for the public to read it, but it was more like of a scientific thing. And
Yeah.
so it was just like I was like, this is way too it's gonna be way too over people's heads because they didn't break it down
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's understandable. So yesterday I was able to customize it and say, I want you to do a deep dive for the general public who doesn't have, strong, AI backgrounds, who
Mm-hmm.
need to learn about this just so they can understand what's the impact and why they should care and, make it simple, take the complex documents and make it simple. And I was like very happy with the output, right?
Yeah.
But again, I was able to give it instructions for the deep dive. It's one of my favorite tools.
So cool. Speaking of your favorite tool, what's one AI tool you can't live without?
Right now, Perplexity AI.
Where do you see us in the next? Let's do near term and then long term with AI.
Near term, we're still going to be turning wheels the way we are right now. Long term, tools are evolving quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that we're just seeing the first iteration of what the tools can do, and there's going to be a whole new iteration that's going to blow our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we're not preparing now, minds are like, you know what I mean? Like, this is the first stepping stone that we need to prepare for the next stepping stone.
Yeah.
And if you haven't prepared with the foundations, you're going to be like over here without a stepping stone.
Yeah, totally.
So,
So speaking of the foundations and preparing, how can our listeners work with you, connect with you? Where can we find you?
yeah, the best way to find me, there's a couple places. So I have a website, undesto.ai, and it's undesto.ai. It is a Spanish slang. Everyone asks me about the name. It is a Spanish slang that stands for uno de estos, those three words, and I'm Puerto Rican, and we smush our words together.
Yes, you
So
do.
that's where undesto comes from.
So we do too in
Um,
Cuba. It's fine.
um, and it just means like a thing, like a whatchamacallit, a thingy,
Yeah.
one of these.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can find me there. And on LinkedIn under Myra Roldan. I believe I'm the only Myra Roldan because I search and no one else pops up.
Good for you.
There is a Myra Roldan on Facebook, and she changed her last name because she kept on getting my messages from other people. She was sick of it. Um,
That's amazing. I love that for her.
yeah, she was just like not happy. She sent me. She's so sweet. She's from the Philippines, and she actually, we've become chummy because she's like,
Nice.
Why do you get so many messages?" I'm like, "Well, you can fill in for me
At any time. She could be your new AI
anytime.
avatar.
Yeah, you can be my clone." Yeah, and then the it's youracademy.ai is we're launching that. We have a public offering coming in January. It's cohort
Nice.
based. It launches January 20th. And if you're interested in joining the cohort, now is the time to do it because seats are limited, and we are like pre-filling right now.
Amazing. Myra, thank you so much for joining us again, and for being part of the Kirkpatrick community and just such a great supporter. And we will talk with you all soon, friends. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.